Hey folks, so this session we're going to add a time to live on the DynamoDB messages that we end up storing. So time to live TTL is basically a number flag that goes on the Dynamo record. It says after a certain amount of time, delete the message. And we want to do this because we don't, even though we're trying to build a decentralized application, we haven't reached that. So we have to use some kind of centralized way to store the data. So for example, if I'm trying to send a message to somebody else and they're not online, we want to store that message somewhere so that by the time, like when they log on a day or two later, they have some way to retrieve these messages. But if they log on 7 days or after, the message is deleted, right? So, and if they do have the message and 7 days pass, it's deleted only on the DynamoDB table, but it's not deleted on their device, but because their device has SQLite, and it'll store the messages until they decide to uninstall the application. That's the case. But when we do eventually get the scenario where it's decentralized, maybe we can create a situation where I delete my application, but I can still retrieve all the messages as long as there's someone else that has a copy of that message, whether it's a one-on-one direct messaging chat or if it's like a chat group where we have like dedicated that are hosting that data, right? So we don't want to get too much into that. We want to come back to what exactly we're doing in this session. That is adding a time to live on DynamoDB record. So you might have seen the .cscd folder. Basically, this is a CDK project from AWS. So, right. Normally, if I were using something like AWS or GCP or Azure, you could go ahead and you'd go into, like, let's say you want to create a table, right? You go ahead and you go to the table section, you say create table, and you start adding the table name, partition key, sort key, all that stuff, and then you hit create table and start using it. That's great. You have a table that's in one AWS account, one environment, but what if you're on like multiple environments? You want to create a development, QA, production, whatever, like multiple different environments, right? You have to repeat these steps, hopefully exactly the same way. And if you make certain changes, you want to make sure you remember this, and appropriately when it's time for a release or whatever it is, you want to replicate these steps. This is error prone. You're gonna, like, I would say, but usually people forget, and I know I would too if I had to do it manually. So in order to avoid these kind of straying from this source of truth, what we could do is we could use this called CloudFormation. It's basically JSON object that defines exactly what we need to create and how to create it. Sorry, I was getting a cough. So we could use this and create it. Basically create the DynamoDB table and any other resources that you can think of in AWS. The problem with this is that it's like a template that is fairly limiting to the variables that you want to add to it. So what I mean by variables is that on the development environment, I don't need a database that's very performant. Maybe it's just enough for one or two single users to basically use it. But for QA and production, we want something that's more performant, like that's able to add, take more resources and work with more resources. So be able to add those variables based on certain logic, it gets a little bit tricky with CloudFormation templates. So what we can do instead is use CDK. CDK is like the same thing as CloudFormation templates, but it's driven by code. So you have a source of truth that sits with our repository, so we know exactly what every environment is supposed to look at just by looking at the code, the definitions in that code. If you don't use AWS, you want to use something else, you could still use CDK because Terraform came up with their own CDK that's inspired by AWS CDK. So you could go ahead and create different stacks on Azure or GCP or whatever it is, and kind of maintain that accuracy from environment to environments. Yeah. So you have an opportunity to use this stuff, use it, learn about it. It's pretty awesome. It helps small teams do big things. Okay. So coming back to the TTL flag, let's just take a look at the actual stack that we have, right? We have three stacks. We have like the database, the repository, and the API stack. So the API stack is where all of the API gateway, actually, we'll just take a quick look at it. This is where we've declared our Lambda function that's going to be running on top of, well, it's basically powered by the API gateway. It's a lot of code and a lot of stuff is commented out, but basically what it is just declaring constructs that will eventually become AWS resources, and that's done. Everything that's related to the API itself, including the Lambda that's going to be running, that's powering all the endpoints, is defined in the API stack. But for us to be able to use the Lambda, what we're doing is we're creating our own Docker repository inside of AWS, so that rather than using Lambdas as zip files and then just telling AWS to go ahead and run this Lambda, we want it just as a Docker image. It just makes our life a little bit easier when we're trying to get away from AWS. There's a little bit of decoupling. There is still a little bit of coupling, but it's not going to be painful. You have to make that or expose options to make that switch away for different nodes that don't want to always run on top of AWS, for example, right? Not saying this particular application is going to be applied somewhere else, but it helps to have that option. And the databases are defined in this particular stack. There's two tables. I created one for the WebSockets because I thought we would end up using WebSockets for the users to receive the messages. We may not end up using this because push notifications also exist. That's a better option. But the table exists, and it already has a time to live attribute, which is TTL, right? But the table that contains all of our data doesn't have that. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add that property as well to this. So there is now a time to live attribute, and that is listening to a field on the record that ends with TTL. So if you were to deploy this stack, and the way we would do that is by running, just basically going to the CI/CD folder and run this basically as a command that says cdk run or npm run cdk deploy database, and then all of this stuff is just arguments for CDK. We don't need to. You can read up about this stuff. I'm sure the documentation does a better job explaining it. So yeah, you can go ahead and basically run and deploy that. I've already done that, and I'm not going to do that on screen because that's going to expose like AWS account numbers and that sort of stuff. So if I'm ever running CDK, it's usually a command that's similar to this. It's like run CDK deploy and then whatever stack that I'm planning to deploy. But I don't think I'll be running this on the terminal where I'm sharing my screen. So. And look at the. Now let's go back over to CloudFormation. We can take a look at tables, and if you look at the time to live, it's already enabled. Yeah, so when you open that database table now, we can see that time to live has been enabled, and there are no records today that have TTL on them, so they're not going to, they're just not going to work. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to take off screen. So let's just read up some documentation of exactly how DynamoDB does time to live, right? So you can give it, when you create a record that's, when you enable time to live, you can tell any field on the record to be associated with time to live. And what it'll do is it'll just, when the time has passed of that time to live flag, it's just going to delete that record for us with no extra cost. So it's a pretty, it's cheap to use that feature. And it could be a number, or it could be a string that, it just has to be a number for the time to live, and it has to be something that can be converted to a timestamp. Obviously, they're saying that there's a few caveats that you have to read up here, but one of them is that if it's longer than 5 years, like older than 5 years, it's not going to do anything about it. Some more notes here. Typically, it's always good to read through all these notes. I've kind of done that. I don't want to do that. Read the documentation verbatim, so feel free to use this stuff. There's some more examples on how to use the time to live, and in this example they're using expiration time, but I think TTL is like, it's clear. I don't think I'll be using that field name for anything else other than expiring record. So yeah, so that's fine. So I'm just going to use that proper name field. So this actually brings me, this particular page on the documentation brings me back to the importance of using something like CDK. So documentation also says, yeah, you can use the console to enable this using some clicking around and going ahead and making the changes. But if you have different environments, it's going to you're going to run into trouble where you have to remember to do certain things. And if you don't add TTL and you go ahead and start adding records, maybe the records don't die. So right, and maybe you have like different downstream processes that are tied to records being deleted. So sometimes when a record is expired and it's deleted, it triggers like there's like a DynamoDB trigger that's supposed to run a Lambda function somewhere, and things just break and you won't remember. And yeah, anyway, always use CloudFormation or something like CDK. It's makes life a lot easier. So go back to the code. Okay, so we've added the TTL flag, which is basically this property. So let's jump over to messages model, and we're going to add a new property here called TTL. That's a number. And because we added this, we want to also do the same thing for the schema. And that is going to be always required. So now that we've added the TTL, we don't want that in the update. We do want this in the, so let's go ahead and try to run the application. Starter app, just all of that. So what's going to happen is because we added a brand new property to our schema, it's going to prevent us from creating the message. over to one of these chats. We're going to copy that ID. Okay. Try to create a brand new message. It's just not going to let us do that. Actually, wait, before we do that, let's just retrieve a couple of messages. So 401 not authorized? Is that because that yes, my token expired, so let's just go ahead and authenticate again. So ID token here, copy. Add a new one in here. Okay. So this time around, hope it's not dizzying on your end. So okay. And creating a new chat. I want to get well, it's probably the great. Where's that error coming from? So this was so we want to just want to understand a little bit more. So called log should have default resource not found. Okay. Yeah. All right. This where is it? Come on, let's compile faster. Yeah, okay. So we have no messages. Oh, okay. Maybe that's because this other chat has no message. Let's go over to something that has messages. So this is a good one. So let's copy this ID instead. Paste. All right. It's not what I was hoping to be. So go and see error message is. Chat ID is required. I have a feeling that's because this record defined. Let's go ahead and delete that. That is probably causing our errors. So where is the undefined chat message? Probably fine. This one. Okay. Probably that has. Let's try to the ID and then the ID is one. It's always better to try to fix. Oh yeah. Okay. Hopefully that should help us. Okay. That helps. Okay, perfect. Now it's fine. That if you're watching for the first time, that was because we created the record the very first time and we made a mistake. So the IDs were not stored, and that's why this validation now thinks that we have something wrong in our database, and which we do. We just never fix that. The two options were to delete that message or to actually fix it. So I just decided good to have more data for testing. Okay, so we have all of that. We don't have a TTL, but just see what happens when we try to create a new message. Copy the content. Just want to make sure type everything out. So it's going to be should fail to lack of TTL. Same. So let's go ahead and have an error over here. Hopefully that is not the error that we were expecting, and that's probably. Try it again. Okay, this is 400. Why? Bad request failure. Look through this stuff and a bad request send message, that is line 30. That ID doesn't match. Okay. Right. Let's just do that. And it worked. It's not what I'm. Okay. Do anything with this schema? Let's see. In this particular file, do anything? Yes, we do. We try to validate this, get the message. So that means that ETL is now. I'm just gonna log a bunch more stuff here. Try it again. Fail. The TTL is missing, and it should have failed it. Why did it? Oh wait, I should always say this dot TTL. Required. What other methods are here? Save, retrieve, list. That's it. Always with these errors that just take of moving things quick. Okay. On to what is it? I don't know what that's supposed to do. I want to validate this. That is here. Yellow is required. I'm gonna go on mute while I think about it a little bit. definitely feel that we need the TTL on this. Some other method we should be using. All right. Oh, that's valid. Valid. Strict. Strict. No, that's probably not what we need. Just want to validate this, but I don't know why it's. I don't know why it's okay with live. Um, fire. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's not ideal. Yeah, it is not ideal. Okay. We'll come back and figure out what's going on with this thing, but we do want to add our TTL anyway. So 1 second. Every time we're trying to save this, what do we call the save? I would call from send message. So in the payload, I'm gonna say that is give it a time. That is path dot or what actually we want date now, right? But I don't think we can use it as is. We have to like delete it, like divide it by some. Jump over to DynamoDB. We can kind of see that number is it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so the time is a lot larger. I mean, the number of digits are a lot longer, right? So this one's only how many? 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 10. This one has 1,000 more. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna divide it by 1,000, but we want to floor it so we get a integer value rather than like float value. So we do provide this time to live, right? So this date now, it's obviously going to say it's we don't want time to live to be now. It's just going to go ahead and delete it. So what we want to do is we'll just say duration time, and we will make this. Do I keep it here, or do you want? I think it makes sense for it to be over here. Here, port duration time is equal to 1 second. That's about a minute. You know what we'll do is just actually make it like 15 seconds. quickly test that at least right now it's set to 15 seconds, but eventually we can make it like a lot longer. But anyway, so live in seconds. That we want to make sure we do the same thing on the update message as well. .content are doing the same thing, so we're good to go there. So let's just go and save everything, all the files. We really just want to see that the TTL is working, and then we can get into that whole schema validation. Okay, so this message should go ahead and create this record. It has created it. Let's make sure we have that in the database. So content, this message should be deleted. I'm gonna open it in a new tab. We do have a time to live. Go back to the form. Yeah, scroll over all the way until we see the TTL. And what does it say? That is not correct. Give it 15 seconds. Did we mess up basic math? Okay. Spell correctly. Okay. Is that greater than this? Right, so track this. Okay, I know what I did wrong. All right, so adding, so we're adding expiration time of 15,000 after converting the milliseconds to seconds. So it's going to be 15,000 seconds. So that's going to be like several. It's not what we wanted to do. We actually want to do this. We want to add the time first. Add that 15 seconds first, and then delete it. Sorry, divided by 1,000. Okay. Date message. We want to do the same thing. We don't have that payload. Yeah. Okay. That TTL will eventually be deleted. It's just not going to happen in this particular in our session. So let's just know what we'll do. We'll actually query as well, so that we want everything where the partition key is set to that, and we only want the messages. We can always sort it in this as well. So we have the messages in the order that they're coming in. So I'm going to just create a new message here. I'm going to call it like, hopefully this one. Hopefully this was it soon. Let's save it. All right, okay, so we got that message, and we will jump over to the TTL. See that this is in a few seconds from now. Okay, all we have to do is just wait a bit, and 15 seconds. So yeah, wait a bit, and when I refresh, it should be only having 11 items. So let's run it again. Still there. Run it again. There. I'm impatient, so I'll run it a few times. Hopefully, it'll just get deleted. Like it doesn't get deleted almost right away because sometimes there is a delay, and it's coming from the DynamoDB documentation. So even if it's set to be deleted 15 seconds, it might take another few minutes after we delete it. So we'll come back to this one. Let's go back to what's going on with the schema validation. We want to see an error, and we are not getting the error. So I'm going to comment this out now, and we also want to comment this out. And let's just take a quick look. So we have the payload at this point without the TTL, and actually, like, do we? Without the TTL? Okay. I got a bunch of other console logs, right? So I'm gonna just get rid of it. Don't need that. This. Gone? Yeah, it's still there. It should be gone anytime. Created this one and still getting some other messages. Now we're gonna have two hopefully messages. Anyway, as long as both of them are gone by the end of this session automatically without us deleting it, that's all we care about. So, okay. So here, look, we do have TTL. No, we don't. Payload without the TTL. This is, and let's be. I want to just stop with the console logs because they're a little bit distracting. But anyway, so the object that we have, it has a chat ID, the sender ID, all this stuff is there in the send message. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, save this, creating a new message from this particular one, and it has the validation. Curious to see what else on. Maybe we need to just validate the whole thing. Shoot. Yeah, I have a feeling that this validation result has an error in here. We'll figure that out. So I know we're using the value here, but we're going to print everything, and hopefully there's an error or a warning, and we can see that because we're doing a console log. So what's going on? Oh, right. Okay. Whatever. That as well. Validation result. There we go. See, we do have an error here. So I think it needs all right. Before we change this, I want to see where else we're using validate. I think it's not strict enough. We do have some in the chat. Want to go. Yeah, so I'm back. Okay, so yeah, we do have an error here, and if you see an error message, we'd want to do something about it. But I mean, look at the code here, right? If we have, like, you can just say, if you say if an error exists, do something here. It's bad. I don't like it. I'd rather have it throw the error right away. So we just want to have a few more things in the stuff here. We just want to say abort early. We'll try that if that works. So if this works, we'll just make this some kind of an object that all the other validations standard. So, oh yeah, I haven't. I didn't share. Okay. What I mean to say is, we know that there's a validation error. Go up far enough. Okay, let me just do that again. Try to show you the validation error. Okay. So validation results. So we know that there is a validation error, and that's that the TTL is required. And we can't really add if validation result.error or whatever. Right? We don't want that. It's just it doesn't. There's probably better ways to do it. So what we're gonna do is we'll say strict. Actually, no. Strict is not going to be doing what we need. We want to actually say abort early through. Right. So if we ever see that there's some kind of a validation error, we just stop with the conversion. Just don't make that object. So hopefully this will work. So see if you get an error message now, don't get an error. Oh boy. Okay. What's going on here? So we'll have to take a look at or I think maybe we want to use assert. Yeah, okay. Documentation comes to the rescue. Okay. We want to do. Yeah, let's do this. So we want to assert that how validate? Validate. Stack wrap. No message. No default. No. No. We do it strict. I don't want the fit. Okay, let's try attempt instead. Call this model, and I would go to take the message, the message schema, and this is and then we'll just say message, sorry, model equals um, me. I have a feeling this output is not what we would expect, so got an error. And that is, oh, thank you. Okay, so this is good. So we get an error message that just says, read what's going on here. Validation error, detail is required. So let's just remove all the console logs that we've added. Here, have some here. Okay. Fine. Just the failure. Okay. Failure. We have validation error. So validation error supposed to be got it. I believe one's just throwing an error. So option. we'll need to make this failure a little bit smarter, so I'm curious to see if there's any. Yeah, so what we want to do is we have to do a little bit of wrangling. I know we get the failure object, but if in case that we don't get a failure object and like a standard error that's from a different framework, in this case, validation error is not ours, it's actually from the Joy framework, right? So what we can do is instead of saying failure, we failure.parse and just send this object in there. If it's a failure, it knows what it is. It will successfully parse it. And if it's an error, it will try to figure out what type of an error it is based on the message. In case if it's saying validation error, it's going to convert it to a bad request failure. Actually, it should be converting it to validation failure. If the message includes validation error, wanted to validation. I don't know why I did. Let's get rid of this one. So we can and save all of our files. Need this anyway, I think. All right. 500. What a token from rid of that console log right now. Extracting. Get a 500 error, most likely because when it tries to parse it, trying to understand what it looks like before and what it looks like after it's parsed, because I don't think it's parsing it properly as a validation error. If it's a validation error, it should be responding with 500, it should be like a 400. Well, actually, no, this makes sense. I mean, at least in this particular. The reason is that it's not coming in from this validation error is not actually happening from our pipe that's requesting, that's actually working with the payload that's being sent from the request, happening when we're trying to save the record in the database. So we are we're modifying the object before we can use it with the database. So it's perfectly fine for it sending 500 error. That's it. Okay. Let's see what happens. What happens if the attempt? Get rid of these work queries. It's a bit distracting. Save everything. Close all the other stuff. I think we need that. We still want to log stuff if there's a failure. Otherwise, it's going to be a bug. Get the 500. That is created as not bigger. Have a completion error. Created at is not. What? Just curious, what is this? IDs. Objects that we have, right? The chat IDs and contents, partition key, ID. This instead. Let's say the message schema is actually not this type of an object, but it is everything in date message scheme appended with DB record scheme. Well, we can. You actually give it partition key. I guess that's okay because then we'll just overwrite it the next append. Test it. We'll just say that is object. What are these two things? That is the object. Wonder if that the same. Yeah, okay. This one. I guess to recap why I'm kind of deep. Looking at the error message, it doesn't make sense. Created ad exists. It says that created ad is not allowed. I understand why the error message happens. Look at the actual object. The object just has these properties. Missing created ad and it's created by it. So I have a feeling there's like some kind of an error that's happening here. What we're gonna do is we're just let's try to understand this a little bit better. Have our value. Props. And we want to see where all of it is done. Actually, log it once. Result. So all right. Let's get rid of it. Go back to it used to be. I'm just going to revert all of that. So have everything is. What are the keys of this value? Props. Okay, I have a feeling there's something wrong in this object that apply these two. Any documentation. Take a look. Go over try something out. A is equal to hello world. Okay. Have B is equal to blue. So we can say object dot assign AB fine. What we were expecting to see. Yeah, let's just so all keys of value. And we'll say filtered and then we'll do this for the filter. Yeah, just take a filtered output and we'll say const mapped. All of this stuff. And then finally, I want to say result is we want all keys filtered mapped. We also have the okay, so that's fine. Let's scroll up. Object. That's the filter. Mapped. Yeah, so far when we get to the mapped, we have exactly what we need. It's an array. We have to do. There's something in Lodash that we want to use merge instead. Yeah, I think maybe I'll try that instead. It's a bit hard to see the whole thing, so get that. So last and result doesn't appear to be okay. So I think there's something wrong with the way I did the object apply, and we never saw it until we started testing this. One way to avoid it is development. Yeah, maybe we'll add some testing. So all of this back, everything in this instead of object apply, we'll do stuff as well. Original. Get the file. Edited is not allowed. Edited. Right, because we forgot about the dates. I have to say edited. boolean required called. All right, and if it's updated schema, we would like to see edited, but we don't want to all the it's going to be true. Required result. Yeah, okay, cool. Attempted result is actually just going to be a message. At all. All right, so enough with the console logs. Hopefully we have what we're looking for. So have stuff that's been saved, and let's just see the TTL. That's in the save message and message. No, and we should still trigger that error message. It should trigger the error, and it'll take a look at why the actually no, that's fine. The failure is internal. It should be a 500. Now, circling back, I have a couple of these error messages, which have the time to live. Actually, only one of them does. It's this one. So copy them. It doesn't exist, and the reason why it doesn't exist is, well, it's got deleted. Move this, run. How about 18 here? They all, well, they don't all have TTL. Some of them do, some of them don't. But I guess the point is that that particular message that had the TTL is now gone. So time to live is working. So I'm gonna off screen do a bunch of testing to see if the schema validation is working well on all the endpoints, to avoid trying to debug it while I'm streaming. But usually, I mean, if there's an error, you just have to add a bunch of breakpoints, or if you're have a debugger attached, you can also add like directly here. Otherwise, you just a bunch of console logs and try to figure out what's going on. What's next? So you have TTL, but it's not exactly 7 days. I made it 15 seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and that expiration time is going to be instead of there in a day 4 times. I believe that is 24 hours. By that by 7. Get that. Or do we have any datetime libraries? Not. I guess you could try to use the duration here. Okay. So minutes to seconds. hours to write this. It's a little late. Seconds every day. Well, 7 days. There we go. 6,000. Copy it. 604,800. Okay. Now add a little to do here. Is AJS or determine that duration. Okay, so what's next? So we have the time to live set to 7 days. Off screen, I'm going to go ahead and test my endpoints to make sure that they're all working fine. Sometime next week, we're going to jump over to the Flutter application, start connecting the backend with aspect, creating the wallet, registering yourself, creating a chat room, a message and receiving messages. It's going to take a little while for that UI to get ready. So in the meantime, there's other stuff that I can be working on, which I guess we can try to do. Try to get into like these contracts, because this application should, the mobile app should allow users to send and receive fungible token, even though that they don't actually have a record. Sorry, they don't actually have an address and a wallet officially created on Near. The fact that their account exists on the smart contract should be enough to do a lot of different transactions. So transfer fungible tokens, transfer NFTs, and transfer here as well. So all of this is going to be done through one of the smart contracts, and it's going to try to maintain the knowledge on who has all the different funds. So we'll see if that. Yeah, so I guess I'm going to jump over to the smart contract side of things. It's going to be a bunch of Rust code. So I'll see you on the next one.